It's Spooky Spectacular month, and we're going to talk about spoopy things all month. Just ignore the fact we skipped the first week of October. For the first video, we'll be looking at the history behind mythology's sexiest bloodsucker, the vampire. The vampire has appeared in hundreds of films, books, and comic books. The vampire has been described in every incarnation, from a sexual predator to a rock star, also ranging from a grotesque bottom feeder to a romantic leading man. Vampires have never stopped being one of the most interesting supernatural creatures. And with the relatively recent release of Dauntmont's Vampire, these blood-sucking creatures are back into the spotlight. Okay, so general housekeeping before we begin. Yeah, Vampire came out in June, but we were still in our hiatus and it's Spookfest, so just give us this.
Death. Since the apple was plucked from the sacred tree, mortality was believed to be God's punishment, a righteous snare to keep mankind from ascending to the stars. They were all so wrong. Death is not a wicked thing, nor some holy retribution. A true punishment would be to never know its sweet kiss. Awaken from the harshness and be born once more.
So with this aforementioned newfound spotlight, this gives us the opportunity to examine vampires on a philosophical level. But first, let us go into that history of the vampire. The vampire, as a supernatural creature, has a long, murderous bloodline dating all the way back to biblical times. Within the Jewish faith tradition, Lilith, the first wife of Adam, was said to be impatient with the first man's sexual skill. Due to a multitude of different circumstances, Lilith went on to become queen of the demons and evil phantoms. She would suck the blood of babies in their cradles and young men, robbing them of their vigor and potency as they slept. Lilith was guilty of dismissing Hebraic beliefs and breaking Mosaic law that forbids draining and drinking the warm blood of living things. In fact, they even have a script that pertains to this within Leviticus 17:14. Therefore I said unto the children of Israel, ye shall eat the blood of no manner of flesh, for the life of all flesh is the blood thereof. Whosoever eateth of it shall be cut off. So, pretty serious business. In the New Testament, the parable goes that Christ saved humankind by spilling his blood before his ultimate sacrifice on the cross. Christ saw the redemptive significance in his blood under the symbolic guise of wine shared with his disciples during the Last Supper. The Gospel of John emphasized the regenerative properties of blood. During the early years of Christianity, the fathers had to redefine their interpretation of the virtues of blood, fearing a return to human sacrifice and cannibalism. The spread of the vampire legend from an anecdotal character to entering the cultural zeitgeist of European widespread collective consciousness was a result of the bubonic plague in the 14th century. To avoid infection, the panicky people rushed to bury the victims of the plague, and in some cases so quick to bury them that they did not even verify that they were clinically dead yet. Days later, when a family vault was opened, the corpses were often in perfectly preserved shape, but spotted with blood. It didn't take the locals too long to think that the corpses had become vampires, while in actual reality, they were unfortunate victims still alive and suffering a long and agonizing death in their coffins, and likely wounded themselves in their bleak attempt at escaping their crypts. History has had many figures that have helped set up what is culturally accepted as a vampire. All these figures have helped influence what we see as a vampire now. Figures in history from Vlad Tepes to Erzsébet Bathory. But perhaps one of the most famous examples of vampires entering into the pop culture is Bram Stoker's Dracula. So, we don't have to really go into more lore of the vampire. You're alive in 2018. You know what a vampire is. So, with this established background knowledge, we can now explore an aspect of the vampire through the lens of philosophy. But we're going to explore vampires not through just the simple history of vampires in our world. We're going to use Nod's vampire in order to explore the philosophical aspects of this supernatural creature. Don't know anything about vampire? Well, let me explain. The plot of Vampire revolves around Jonathan Reed, a doctor who has turned into a vampire. Coming to terms with his undead condition, he must deal with being torn between the Hippocratic Oath and his newfound bloodthirsty nature. Within the game, the player is under no obligation to kill anyone. To finish the game, dialogue options can be used for hunting prey to feed on, which increases Jonathan's strength and levels him up throughout the game. The entire game takes place in a epidemic-rattled London, which serves as a fictionalized open world composed of 4 different districts, which can be destroyed based on the player's actions.
'Tis perhaps the countdown to oblivion for the once proud city of London. 'Tis perchance her inhabitants' last dance alone to face death and pestilence. Confronted by the eerie and unknown, mortals became desperate for answers. A flock's flight makes for an omen, the falling of a star a dire presage. Turning to priests for interpretation when there was no reason to be found. When religion failed, men turned to science. I saw them build such vain cities, crafting machines made for endless war. New questions flourished as old answers withered. What is darkness but lurking sun? What is wall but enslaved stone? What is glass but tortured sand? What is song but a call to arms? What is hate but jilted love? What is life but death pending?
So with all of that out of the way, we can tackle the philosophy that I would love to examine utilizing vampire. So we are going to explore the animalistic and demonic aspects of the vampire. Like in many other settings, the vampires and vampire bring upon a level of disgust for the people in this world in which they are found in. The hunting of rational beings by rational beings brings forth this uncontrollable disgust. This indicates that rationality too has instincts attached to it. If we define rationality as the ability to understand meaning, perhaps even the ability to grasp it, we begin to see the source of this disgust. Within the game, it is made very clear that the animal and demonic aspects of the vampire cannot be separated because both the demon and the vampire are rational predators. Rational beings instinctively understand other rational beings to have a moral agency, and because of this must be ends rather than means. For example, in our world, we objectively know that a human killing another human is wrong.
Thirsty. So thirsty.
My sweet brother. What have you done?
Mary! Oh, no! Mary! Hold on! Please, hold on! Oh, God. Oh, no. Mary. No. No.
No! Please, a moment, let me explain!
Of course, the apparent exceptions of slavery and warfare prove the rules, since in slavery and the warfare of primitive people, as well as democracies, both are confronted with the necessity of dehumanizing their targets or denying their rationality. So when a rational being praised another rational being with a complete grasp of the other being's rationality, it is actively diabolical.
I mean you no harm. I need help. Die, you fucking leech! Please, listen to me. I can't make any sense of this. Shut up, beast! Who are you? What is this all about? What in God's... That'll do the rest of the job. Just leave me.
So we're setting up examples of the vampire's animalistic and demonic aspects. Yet, for all that being said, the rational human must also engage in animal activities, most notably eating and reproduction. Through animals engage in these activities instinctively, humans cloak these activities in ritual and without modern prejudices. Humans understand these things to have more than natural meaning, and thus the rituals of marriage and the banquet and feasting with friends and family have more than natural meaning, and both have sacramental aspects. The vampire, on the other hand, prays, perverts, and conflates these ceremonies. It too reproduces sexually by the crossing of bloodlines. It pollutes sacraments by mixing them. It nourishes itself not by destroying a beast or a plant, but by interfering with the salvation of another soul. The human sanctifies its animal actions through ceremony, acknowledging that its rationality allows it to understand their meaning. The vampire too is rational, but it inverts the same sacraments and infuses them with diabolical intentions. Throughout the game Vampire, we are reminded over and over again that this is what vampires are. They can't help it. It is a part of their nature, which separates them from humanity, making them into these perverted copies of humans.
Well, brother, it's time to bring this conversation to an end. Forever.
You know I will not play this game.
Calm now, Doctor. Like a rabid dog. Or think you're performing an autopsy.
Don't be ridiculous.
I'll kill them all. The kind Dr. Swansea. The sweet little lass with hair of red. I am the Harbinger, bringing your punishment.
Mary.
Don't you see? This is not me. Flesh that never ages. All nightmare, no dream. Bring it to a close. Let me sleep.
I will find a cure, Mary. I swear it.
Then, at last, I can forgive you.
It's why Dr. Jonathan Reed sees them as a disease that needs to be cured, because they take everything that is humanity and perverts them, darkens them, and turns them into a demonic parody of itself. As shown in Vampire, the primal malevolence of the vampire indicates that the possibility of a scientific understanding of its nature is impossible. The vampire simultaneously comprehends and rejects the good. So the game shows us that, in its perversion of natural sacraments, the creatures known as vampires are nihilistic in the sense that they pervert and corrupt their natural meaning. There is no science of the vampire precisely because it cannot be understood except within the logic of the meaning that it works to undo.
Blood. As I shed one last red tear for my fallen sister, I realize the entire world now revolves around this singular word.
The epidemic that has stricken London is not the Spanish flu. It is transmitted through the blood via violent biting, turning survivors into frenzied immortals. I am Dr. Jonathan Reed. I am a vampire, born anew into an age of death and pestilence. While plotting factions close in around me, I am sworn to find the source of this epidemic. I am convinced greater perils are still to come. I know the answers I seek are hiding in our blood.
But hey, it's getting late, and that's just one way of thinking about it. If you have another, or want to see another way that we may have thought about it, put it in the comment section below and start a discussion. Want to see more videos like this? Like and subscribe. This has been Derek from Entertainment Stew, signing off.